Hi, I'm Mike Wilson, and I head up consultant relations within Morningstar's investment management team. Today, I'm joined by David Blanchett, head of retirement research, and Dan Bruns, who heads up our large plan practice team. In today's webinar recap, David and Dan will talk about some of the latest research that we've done, research that we believe leads to actionable items for plan sponsors and consultants to improve participant outcomes. With that, David, I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thanks, Mike. So today there's really kind of three things we want to recap from the presentation we gave previously. The first are some high-level thoughts on things that you can do as a plan sponsor to improve savings rates. The second is kind of rethinking the plan defaults today given the variety of options out there. And then third, redefining the core menu, just given the fact participants are utilizing defaults more today than ever. When thinking about offering any kind of solution inside of a DC plan, we often refer to this thing called the Advice Continuum. And what this reflects is kind of the array of options that exist at different participant expertise and cost levels. We think that in the absence of cost, working with a financial planner would be the optimal solution. However, that's not realistic, again, given the costs involved. So the key then is finding where on the spectrum it really is best for participants in your plan. We've obviously moved away from self-selection as an option. So today, most plan sponsors focus on either offering target date funds or managed accounts as a possible solution. Now, one thing that's important for us to mention before we continue is that in Morningstar, we actually play in all these spaces. We actually offer target risk funds, target date funds, and managed accounts. So it gives us the opportunity to be more impartial when reflecting on the benefits and costs of each respective strategy. So first, we want to talk about default savings rates. And what we looked at here were the differences in savings rates for participants who utilize target date funds and managed accounts. What we found is a pretty profound difference across ages, where individuals who are defaulted in managed accounts tended to save more on average than those who are defaulted in target date funds. Now, an important caveat behind this difference is that the most of this difference can be explained away because participants in managed accounts as the default have attributes where they tend to save more. They tend to have, for example, longer tenure, higher income levels, et cetera. However, even after controlling for all these different variables about, the employer match schedule, the participant's tenure, their gender, this difference still persisted. And this really surprised us because we didn't expect the default to have this effect. And we're not sure where this is coming from. We think that it could be that participants who have managed accounts as the default engage with managed accounts, and that kind of gets them to actually end up saving more. But regardless, the findings were pretty robust in that participants, again, who were defaulting in managed accounts did have higher savings rates. Now, another key finding with this research was the importance of the plan default enrollment rate. So if you're going to offer automatic enrollment, you've got to choose what is the default for the plan. Is it 3% or 6% or some kind of higher value? And, probably the most interesting finding with the research was that if you don't utilize a default of more than 6%, that your participants end up saving less on average than if you didn't have automatic enrollment. It's true that when you use automatic enrollment, more participants join the plan. There's higher participation. However, they may tend to save less. And this is really important given where automatic enrollment rates are today. Right? So on this slide, you see the data on what our plans doing today that offer automatic enrollment. And the vast majority pick a value that is less than 6%. Right? But if you pick a value less than 6%, you're actually hurting your participants. They're going to be saving less on average than if you use voluntary enrollment. Now, you can do other things that also improve outcomes for participants. Right? So this is kind of our estimate of the relative impact of doing different things on outcomes for participant savings. And if you have automatic enrollment that at 3%, we estimate that you'll have about a 5% deferral rate on average. Okay. If you want to start increasing that, well, what can you do? Well, the first thing you can do is change that default from 3% to 6%. Right. Next, think about adding progressive savings, where the deferral rate increases every year by 1 or 2%. Right. Next, add a look back. Force participants to go in at least once a year and make a decision about their retirement savings. And then finally, consider adding managed accounts. Right. This research really does suggest that having it as a default resulted in higher savings rates on average, which was meaningful. I'll turn it over to Dan to talk about the investment part of the equation as well.
Thanks, David. So looking at the investment part of the equation, we often hear the question, an average participant, right? When you look at a target date prospectus, you see that the fund is built for an average participant. And so who is that average participant? The average participant has an average balance, pension, retirement age, savings rate, gender, and income, right? And the average participant is really nobody. And so now let's look at how different investment solutions used as defaults today, how they consider the average participant. Well, if you look at a target date fund, again, these are built for an average participant, and they're based on one data point, age or really retirement age. Custom target date funds offer significantly more customization because now you can incorporate both industry and plan-specific attributes as well into the investment equation. Moving to the managed account solution, you can see that much more data is considered. And so really with a managed account, you're moving from an average investor or building a glide path or a fund for an average investor to building the fund and the investment recommendation for a specific investor. And so how does building the investment decision, the equation for a specific investor influence recommendations? Well, here we have the glide path for participants who are defaulted into target date products. And so as you can see, this is a fairly tight band, fairly constrained, and that would make sense because the only deviations are different target date glide paths, some de-risking more quickly than others. We also have the recommendations for participants who are defaulted into managed accounts. And here you can see much greater distribution, much greater dispersion. Now, this is a result of that data being personalized to the individual level. And what we see is before age 35, the distribution is not as great, but once you pass age 35 and move towards retirement, that personalized data has more and more of an impact on specific recommendations given to participants. Now, if participants in managed accounts choose to engage, we see even further distribution of data. And so here along the x-axis, you have age. On the vertical axis, you have equity recommendations or equity allocations, and these blue circles represent individual participants who use the managed accounts program. And what you can see is that this personalized data, right, considering individualized data about every person and making an investment decision with that has significant differences on the equity level of these participants and the asset allocation of these participants. And so, David, do you want to talk a little bit about the core menu?
Sure. So obviously the core menu is something that plan sponsors spend a lot of time thinking about, which investment options to include in a plan. And one really important behind the core menu is this fact that its utilization is changing, right? It used to be the core menu was the place where participants would go to build portfolios. Right? Today, though, increasingly, we see core menus as not an afterthought, but not as the main place for participants. Right? Participants today are, by and large, being defaulted into different investments like target date funds. And so the core menu, we think, should exist to help participants who want to build diversified portfolios the chance to do so. So the key is not simplification, it's breadth. It's assuming that it's ensuring that participants who want to build portfolios can do so adequately. Because if you have solutions like managed accounts or advice in the 401k availability, then they can build better portfolios using these more diverse asset classes. And if you look at the impact this has on risk-adjusted returns, it's significant, right? What we find is that if you offer very basic lineups, just large cap, cash, and bonds, you really can't build high-quality portfolios. As you add in complexity, as you add in things like TIPS and long-term bonds on the fixed income side and emerging markets, international small cap, and even alt on the equity side, you really can create better portfolios for participants that leads to better retirement outcomes and more wealth at retirement. I'll pass it back to Dan to kind of wrap things up now.
Thanks, David. So we believe that the best investing outcomes are really a function of both art and science. And today we've talked about research, which is definitely the quantitative part of this equation, right? It's the science, and that's really understanding the research. But equally important is the art of investing. And the art of investing is knowing your participants, your plan, and your experiences with those participants and those plans. And this is where a consultant or engaged plan sponsor can add a considerable amount of value. And we believe you have to consider both art and science to yield the best outcome. In summary of today's webinar, I think there's 5 things that really that you should really take away and consider. And first, that there's been a significant change in the options available for plan defaults. When you think about the Pension Protection Act passing in 2006, managed accounts were very expensive. Their user interfaces were not very robust, and they didn't have very good connections to plan providers. It has all changed now. Managed accounts are much cheaper and are much more robust. So managed accounts is now a very viable QDIA option. Second, savings is critical. There's been a lot of research that shows that automatic improves employee participation, but you need to pick the right savings rate, and we believe that to be at least 6%. And finally, third, I just made my health insurance election a few days ago. And when participants enroll in the DC plan, they forget about it, right? And so we're being reminded every year to re-engage and make new health elections is comforting for me. And I think that that should be incorporated as part of your DC plan. So annual look-backs where you force employees to come back in and re-engage are valuable. Fourth, we've talked about these previously things, and we realize that they come with a cost. The real question is the cost worth it? So we would just ask that you analyze the cost to benefit value for any option you make to your DC plan. Yes, managed accounts may cost more. It very well be worth it. And finally, the purpose of the core menu has changed. And the investor who uses the core menu is not the same as the investor who used it 10 years ago. Today, core menu is used by engaged investors and service providers, and it's important to provide them the building blocks necessary to construct robust portfolios.
David and Dan, thanks so much for joining us today to share the results of your important research. There really are some great takeaways for consultants and plan sponsors who are looking to improve participant outcomes. If you have additional questions or would like to learn more about one of our products, please reach out to me at michael.wilson@morningstar.com or contact me using the phone number listed on the slide. Thanks so much for attending.